Let's talk a little Aggie baseball. Number one in D1 baseball's most recent preseason rankings this morning. It just came out at 8 a.m. We go to the Boss Firearms Hotline. That's where we find Kendall Rogers of D1 baseball. Kendall, what up, buddy?
Oh, not too much. It's good to talk to you.
So last week I reached out to you because I heard that the rankings were coming out. I was not sure where A&M was going to be. I was hoping they'd be number one, but I figured they'd be in the top three. Why is Texas A&M number one?
I think the biggest thing for me is I always look at teams that get right on the cusp of a national championship. And, obviously those teams are always ultra motivated the next year, even if they lose a bunch of guys. And this is a team that has a bunch of pieces back, and the pieces they added are also ultra experienced pieces. We can go back and look at, A&M's ability and Mike's ability to keep, the returning guys on campus, but let's not forget he was able to get Gavin Cash. Wyatt Hensler was the guy that really could have just picked wherever he wanted to go, yet he stuck with his commitment. And so I just think when you look at the returning pieces, and then you look at how good the transfers are, particularly, Cash, who was awesome in the fall, and Hensler, who, set, all sorts of Ivy League records. The sky's the limit for this team. Obviously, they're going to have to go out there and prove it. But, given what they went through in the offseason, given how last season ended just on the field, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I don't think focus will be a concern with this team at all.
So, Kendall, where do you maybe have some questions about this roster or this team?
Yeah, I think, anybody would look at I guess, coaching would be the wrong way to say it, but how does A&M moving forward, especially Mike Earley, how does he manage late in the game? You're in the SEC, you're going to be in series where it's going to be 7-7 in the eighth. How is Michael Earley as a manager? We all think he's a good coach. We all think he connects with the kids really well, but how does he manage late in the game? I wouldn't say it's a concern. I would say it's more of we don't really know. So, what do we expect? So that's one thing I kind of keep an eye on. The other thing I would kind of pinpoint would just be the back end of the bullpen. It's not that I'm concerned about it from a talent standpoint. The talent is absolutely there. I'm a big fan of guys like Clayton Freshcorn. Grant Cunningham was electric at Washington last year, et cetera. But again, you're losing one of the best ever in Evan Ashenbach, and it'd be disrespectful to him to say, oh well. Even with him gone, they're not going to skip a beat, because they will skip a beat to some degree. The question is how much. And so that would be the only two concerns I have. Obviously, I feel great about Ryan Prager at the front of the rotation. We talk about motivated. The fact that he came back after being offered, around $1.3 million from the Angels kind of gives you an idea of where his mindset is. Justin Lampkin, I feel like, is to me, is kind of the guy I circle as a breakout candidate. I thought his numbers last year were a little worse than what he really pitched. And then, the other guy for me that I'm sky high on is Caden Wilson. I think we all kind of saw that a little bit in Omaha last year, how electric he can be. But I think Caden Wilson's another guy for me that's going to take a massive leap. I think he's going to be pretty special this year.
For those who haven't watched Gavin Cash play, tell us a little bit about, because obviously he had a good fall. He has great numbers. How he fits in with this team.
Yeah, Gavin has arguably the most interesting career I've ever seen in my life. Apparently, he's on the rivalry tour because, he started at Texas. He went to Texas Tech. He's at A&M. I joked with somebody at the ABCA last week that maybe he'll just get another year and go to TCU or something. But he's had certainly an interesting path. But, he was the Big 12 Player of the Year 2 years ago at Texas Tech. Obviously massive power. Last year, I say his season didn't go that great. The guy well over double-digit home runs and a lot of RBIs. But, the swing and miss was up for him last year. I think when you look at what he did in the fall, I didn't see that. Granted, it was one scrimmage. But, honestly, I thought Gavin Cash was the best hitter I saw in the scrimmage against U of H. He was, the zone awareness was really good. He pounded the baseball. He just looked locked in. And again, we liked all the returning guys, but I tell you what, if Gavin Cash returns to who he was 2 years ago, you're talking about a lineup that literally does not have a weak link. And so that to me is kind of an X factor, because, you kind of assume that he's going to be a guy that's going to hit, 285 like last year and with a lot of home runs, but a lot of strikeouts. But if he can cut those strikeouts down, he's as good as anybody on that team, outside of maybe Jace.
Well, I'm looking at the potential lineup that Bronny put out there. I mean, Caden Kent, as good as he was last year, he could be at the bottom of the order, and that's not a slight at him. That just shows you the kind of talent that they have around him.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, even the catcher position, Jacob Galloway, Bear Harrison, Jamal George, all three of those guys are going to hit. The question is, are they going to hit 280? Are they going to hit 300? I made a joke with somebody, at the ADCA a couple weeks ago that, they may not have a guy hit under 300, and that's really difficult to do. And I know that's a very lofty kind of expectation, but it really could be reality. But, Caden Kent, to me, is another guy that's ultra interesting. I mean, you look back at last year, really wasn't in the mix for a prominent role. Is kind of forced into the rotation of players. Was really good defensively. They couldn't get him out in Omaha. He almost had the hit there in the final game against Tennessee. Then he goes off over the summer at the Cape and also rakes. So again, if he continues kind of where he left off, it's very scary. It's one of those teams where Jason Kelly would be mad for me saying this, but it's one of those teams that if they pan out offensively the way they should, you literally could have like a 4.5 to 5 ERA on this team, and you're still winning 50 games.
Talking to Kendall Rogers here on TexAgs Live, presented by David Gardner's Jewelers. All right, Kendall, let's talk about Gavin and Jace, the expectations for them this year, the kind of players that they already are, and maybe where Jace is going to be historically when it comes to his place in A&M baseball.
Yeah, what's really interesting, and we'll start with Jace, but what's really interesting about him is, coming out of high school, the knock on him from scouts is that he didn't have a lot of confidence at the plate. He swung and missed a lot. And what's really funny about that is those are the two kind of critiques that scouts had about Dylan Cruz, who obviously player of the year, ended up getting a lot of money in the draft. And Jace is kind of following that same pathway. It's the same concerns. It's the same production after he got on campus in college. And the thing about him is, I think, you look back to last year and the average wasn't, quite what it could be. But I think he's one of those guys this year. I think he's hitting 320, 340 with comparable or better power numbers. I just think he's a really special player. I think, honestly, getting the fall off, the ability to, rest that injury, rest his body, I think it's really going to pay off for him. I think Gavin, again, I say he's a breakout candidate in the sense that I think he'll be a lot more consistent in the zone. Obviously, he showed premium power last year and came out, massive in some big situations, including the home run against the Vols in Omaha. But, I think he's one of those guys that, he cuts down on strikeouts exponentially this year. And again, if he does that, the numbers he's going to put up are pretty ridiculous. But, the thing that's nice about this lineup, especially as it pertains to Jason Gavin, is typically the way teams are structured, you can have clubs that could kind of pitch around them just a little bit. Back when Texas had Ivan Melendez, teams could kind of pitch around him a little bit and not let him, kill you every single bat. But this is a team that, you cannot afford to walk Gavin Grahovic. You cannot afford to pitch around Jace Lavalette because guess what? You got, Wyatt Hensler and Caden Sorrell and, Gavin Cash right after those guys. So, man, it's going to – I say this. It is going to be a fun season if you're an A&M baseball fan because this is what I would call a historic lineup, and they're going to score a lot of runs.
We're talking to Kendall Rogers here on TexAgs Live. So the NCAA is granting junior college players, and I don't know how long-term of a plan this is going to be, but we saw it in football with Diego Pavia getting an extra year. How's it going to change baseball, in your opinion, Kendall?
Well, it would have changed a lot for A&M had this ruling come out 5 months ago. I'm 100% convinced that Evan Ashenbeck could be back at A&M if this ruling came out 5 months ago. So one of those cases of, what if, but it's fascinating. I think when you look at college rosters around the country, they're already old. This would make them even older. And frankly, this would be a situation to where they would make college coaches even more reliant on the portal and older players because, if you're going to Blinn Junior College for 2 years and you're in your third year at Florida and you want to transfer out, you're talking about a guy that's going to be 23, 24 years old when he comes into your program as opposed to, bringing in a kid from College Station High who's 17 or 18 years old. So I think it's going to make the rosters older. There's an argument to be made that's not a good thing. The bread and butter of college athletics historically is kind of building kids up from high school and just kind of building that foundation. Now I think it's going to shift it even more so towards the transfer portal. But, I think it's kind of silly to give somebody 6 years of eligibility. But, it's one of those things, again, if you're willing to take the NCAA to court right now, you're either going to win or they're going to just fold and give you whatever you want. And that's kind of what happened here.
Get a last thing for you. I know we talked about Michael Earley earlier, but just talk about the likability factor with him. Such a likable guy. Look, it comes down to wins, right? They got to win. But there's something about his personality that, people just gravitate to.
Yeah, and I don't want to promote a story on our site, too much. But, I did a column today on Early, and I was talking to Tracy Smith, who was his boss at Arizona State, coached Mike in Indiana. And one of the really cool things that, he said, Mike kind of called him out of the blue, back when he was at Arizona State, was like, hey, I don't even want to get paid. I just want to come watch and see what you guys do at ASU. And he just said from that point on, the initiative that he showed to want to learn as a coach kind of sold him on him. As a coach and as a person. And, the thing about him that's really interesting is Mike is not your typical first-year coach. And what I mean by that, in a couple of ways, right? One, he's never been a head coach. So, he's only been a full-time assistant for a couple of years. So that's very unique. But the more important thing for me is he has the mindset of a guy who's been a head coach for 10 years. Whether you talk to him or I talk to him, he knows he's good, and he knows he has the ability to do this job. And honestly, at this level, confidence and thinking you can do it is half the battle, especially when you have a team like you do with A&M. So I think, if A&M had a coach right now with a kind of a passive personality, it might be a little bit of a concern in the first year. But this is a guy who is ready to go out, not literally, but is one of those guys that mentally would be ready to go out there and brawl with his team if he needed to. And I think that's going to mesh really well with this club and certainly probably really well moving forward.
Kendall, great stuff, man. Look forward to our weekly hits here when baseball starts. The February 14th weekend?
Yeah, opening week. It was opening weekend. I think A&M opens at Elon. Of course, it's Schloss's alma mater, so I know everybody loves that.
Thanks for bringing it up, Kendall. Appreciate you.
You got it.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.